Our next question from Draper. Bill, he has a question about businesses leaving America. Bill, you're on the line with Senator Lee.
Yes, fine.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Senator Lee. Thank you for taking the time.
You bet.
My question is, all these companies that have been in our country and we've supported for 100 years are now moving their plants into Mexico, and we feel like we're being left high and dry. The small business guy that's trying to make a living can't compete with the Mexico wages and benefits. How do you feel?
Okay. Bill, thank you for asking this question. I think it's important for us, whenever we approach that question, to ask why. Why is it that so many businesses are choosing to relocate some or even all of their operations to a foreign country? Most of these businesses, nearly all of them I would say, who do choose to relocate, do so very reluctantly, in fact with great sadness. They don't want to do this. American entrepreneurs, business people, love this country. They want to be operating here in the United States of America, and they end up taking on additional risks when they choose to leave our borders and go somewhere else. But they do so for a reason. They do so generally not because they're greedy, but because things have become so intolerable here, things have become so expensive here, that they feel that in order to protect their businesses, in order to protect their investment of blood, sweat, and tears, in addition to whatever money they have invested, that they have to go somewhere else. So we have to ask the question, why? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we've developed a federal regulatory system that imposes $2 trillion of compliance costs on the American economy every single year. Now, this $2 trillion that American businesses and American consumers have to pay into our regulatory system every year in order to comply with it is kind of it's a backdoor invisible tax almost. I mean, that's about 2/3 of what the U.S. tax code costs the American people. But this is not a cost that is borne simply by the wealthy. It's not borne simply by big blue chip corporations with large Wall Street presences. No, this is something that is borne predominantly, overwhelmingly, by poor and middle class Americans, by the average everyday citizen who just wants to provide for his or her family and make sure that there's bread on the table and that the lights stay on. Because you see, the American people, including 3 million Utahns, pay more for everything. They pay higher prices for goods and services, and they also pay for these regulatory compliance costs through diminished wages and unemployment, in some cases underemployment. So we've got to spread this message that this cost of complying with our bloated regulatory system is hurting the American people. Now, keep in mind, this is not something that is a permanent fixture of government. Sure, we've had a federal regulatory system in place for many decades, but as recently as 2 decades ago, just 20 years ago when I was in law school, I discovered, to my great horror, that the federal regulatory system was costing the American economy $300 billion a year. It's now nearly 7 times that. We've got to turn it around. Another problem that is leading to the unfortunate events that you're describing of American businesses leaving our shores and going somewhere else has to do with the fact that our tax code is horrible. 100 years ago, our tax code included just a few hundred pages. It was probably a few hundred pages too many even then. But now our tax code occupies nearly 100,000 pages. No one's ever read the whole thing. If they did, I'm convinced they would promptly die. But the tax code itself reflects a serious problem. We have the highest corporate tax rate of any developed country in the entire world. We've got an overly complex tax code, both on the corporate side and on the individual side. It's one of the reasons why I've been working on a tax reform plan with one of my colleagues, a senator from Florida named Marco Rubio. Our tax plan would help Utah families and families throughout the United States of America by dramatically simplifying the tax code, resulting in most Americans, about 85% of the American people paying under one simplified reduced rate of 15%. It would help families across America and throughout Utah. It would help businesses. It would help prompt investment. And it would put the American people back in charge of their own lives.